Welcome to First Responder Friday. My name is Conrad Weaver. I am your host for the program, and we are broadcasting live. Well, we're recording this live on a little bit earlier. This is not July 3rd right now, but we are recording this live because of my wife and I are going to be traveling, and so we decided to record this interview ahead of time. We welcome you. Thank you for joining us today on our Facebook or YouTube. And if you would like to comment or ask questions, our guest today is here with us, and he is going to be in the room to take your questions as you ask them, and he'll put those comments and responses in the chat as you ask. So it's exciting to be here. We have Matt Fiorenza is going to be joining us in just a minute and talking about firefighter and paramedic wellness and the issues and things surrounding that. So we're excited to have him here. But I want to tell you a little bit about this program. So we are producing this live program and these interviews as a part of the PTSD 911 documentary that we're producing. We are bringing in experts from around the country to talk about wellness, to talk about first responder wellness and the issues surrounding that. And we want to create an audience and a message that our first responders need our support. And so if you could help us out and share this Facebook page or share the YouTube channel with your friends and your network, that would be awesome. And in just a couple of weeks, we are going to be launching our first crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo to help raise money for this project. So if you are so inclined to make a contribution to our film, we have great perks on there. And there's also a way to honor a first responder. So once we launch that, you'll get to see what that's all about. But if you would like to sign up, go to ptsd911movie.com and sign up for our email so that you know exactly when we're launching, and then share it with your friends in your network. That would be awesome for you to do that. We would really appreciate that. And so that will be launching on July 15th. We'll give you more information about that as we go forward. But today we are honored to be joined by Matt Fiorenza. Matt is a firefighter and paramedic in Southern California. He's been doing that for 18 years, and he's going to talk a little bit about his story, and then we'll dive in. Matt, welcome to the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So tell me a little bit about how you got started in the firefighting and paramedic business.
Oh, wow. So, I'm not one of those people that, wanted to be a firefighter since I was a little kid, but there was always part of me that wanted to be of service. I come from a military family. My father he was a Vietnam vet and a Marine and an Orange County sheriff sergeant. And so, I thought about long and hard growing up about what I wanted to do. Of course, like every kid, I wanted to be a singer in a punk rock band, and that didn't work out. So true story. Like I said, the part of me always wanted to be of service. So I met my wife at the time. Her mom worked for the Forest Service, and she was always talking about, she was a purchasing agent. She was always talking about base camp and fire camp and fire this and these campaign fires. And it just interested me. So I thought this might be the thing. So I went in, signed up for a class down at Mount San Antonio College in Southern California. And a chief at the time popped in a video of the men and women doing the job. And I was like, this is it.
And that you just kind of found your thing.
Right? Yeah, that was it. I was like, this is what I want to do. And I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And for the next 5 years, I worked really, really hard. As most first responders who have or on the job know, it's not easy. There are so many hoops and hurdles, and there's so many things that you have to accomplish and get really, really good at. Getting the job is a job in itself.
When was that time when you first realized that, man, this job is messing with me? This job is getting to me a little bit.
Well, I looking back now, I can tell you that I didn't really know, or I wasn't really conscious of what all this trauma was actually doing to my brain, and what was happening, and that these coping skills that I had that weren't very good, just weren't working after a long period of time. So, I mean, I remember the night the novelty of the job wore off. It was a bad night, and I witnessed a lot of, gruesome, horrible things that just happen, and some things that other human beings did to human beings, and it was just, I remember the moment I was like, okay, I was up all night. It was just trauma after trauma after trauma. The novelty of the job wore off really quick, and it wasn't that far into the job. It was probably, I would say 7 months into the job. Now, I didn't really start having really, really bad signs and symptoms until it was about, I would say, about 10 years on the job. That's when I started noticing the insomnia and the replaying of these horrific scenes over and over, and that eventually, I was put on medication, and it spiraled out of control from there. But
so when you first kind of became aware of some things happening in your mind, you were still pretty young, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I got hired at 25 years old, which is pretty young. And so yeah, I like I said, these things start happening, and you really you don't know, right? Back then it's just, hey, if you're having trouble sleeping, it's because you were up all night and you couldn't, it wasn't talked about, it's just, take a nap if you're tired, or
what were those things that people said? I mean, that your higher ups, said, hey, I mean, what I've been told is, back in the day it was, get over it. Here's a beer.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of the time that was it. And I was down to take that beer, because that's, I'll just put it out there. I'm an alcoholic in recovery, so, but back then I like to have fun. And I would gladly take that beer. You had, certain people on the job that were really empathetic and compassionate, that would tell you to, go home and just rest and take it easy. I actually had an engineer call my wife at home one day and say, hey, take it easy on Matt today. We had a bad night, which was really few and far between, because mostly it was, let's go have a beer, or, let's go joke about it. There's that dark humor that I was part of, and I just don't believe in anymore, and it's not healthy. Right. And I wasn't told at that time that really post-traumatic stress is, trauma is in our job description. And that post-traumatic stress is really a lot of just unmourned grief, and that I wasn't processing that grief properly, and what I was taught recently is that there's only, the mature mood of a warrior is sadness, and the only way through sadness is tears. And that's how our body processes grief. And that I was told at a young age that boys don't cry, men don't cry, suck it up, and that was a lot of the attitude. It was like, and that was the last thing I wanted to do as a new firefighter, was cry. Like, if the guys saw me doing that, it was, I would probably get made fun of, and I'd be the talk of the, stations around town. Hey, did you hear Matt was bawling his eyes out like a big baby? That just, it's just not what we did, and if you did, you were made fun of, really,
So then you said after about 10 years, you got put on medicine. Were you like sent by the chief to see a psychologist? What was the process there?
I would say no. At first, I dissociated, which is a fancy way of saying, numb out, in a lot of unhealthy ways. So the first people that would, realize, if you will, that there was a problem were the people at home, my family, right? So my relationship suffered. My relationship with my wife suffered. And usually I went to therapy or went to see a counselor or went to the doctor to talk about what was going on the wife card, we call it. You know, it was showing up at home and not being there, not being present, not being a good husband, not being a good father, and, you know, time, anything I could do to escape what was going on up here at the time I didn't realize was just hypervigilance and really trauma to my brain. And what we know now is what I like to say is PTSD, right? That it's an injury, and that all these coping skills would stop working, and then it started affecting my relationship. And it was like, you know, my wife was like, "Hey, you probably need to go talk to someone and see someone." So it really wasn't at the direction of the chief at the time. We had an EAP, and I like to always say that my department did the best they could with what they had at the time. It's just that's just a fact, you know. And I always like to say that because there was some mistakes made, but I don't blame anybody. I don't. I think, like, in particular now, my fire chief Pat Russell is super supportive of everything I do out in the community now, and he was one of my biggest. He was one of my biggest advocates when everybody had kind of given up on me. So I like to say that they did the best they could with what they had. And so the EAP that we went to as firefighters in the city I work for was just the EAP that the secretaries in the city went to, and the you know, just anyone who worked for the city went to these particular doctors, right? So there were a few times, that I went on my own, and I have to be candid and say that, and real, because this is going on, and it's not a make wrong. It's just, I was told by one doctor who diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder that I needed some Xanax and a good lawyer, you know? And so, and to their defense, I wasn't always completely honest about what was going on with me and what I was doing to dissociate. I wasn't ready because I was still in a lot of fear, because it's a byproduct of post-traumatic stress, is just being in fear a lot. And so I was in fear of losing the one thing I'd worked so hard for, right? That this career as a firefighter. Mm-hmm. So I at first I went on my own.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, without going into, you know, all the details, what are some of those cliff notes that kind of, how far did it go? How deep did it go? And then, because I want to really focus on what you're doing today, but let's hear, because I want to see where you went and kind of where you came from.
Yeah. So after the marriage failed because of infidelity, you know, another way of dissociation. It's not, I'm not making excuses for myself, but, you know, it's the use of extramarital affairs and things like of those nature are just another way another bad coping skill. So between that and the drinking, my marriage failed, and so going through a divorce, getting force hired nonstop, having to pay a child support number that was based on a number of financially that I was being forced to work overtime. So it's this real scary cycle of telling the judge, "Hey, sir, I really don't make this much money. It's just I get force hired because that's how the department's doing it right now for whatever reason." And he's like, "Let me see your last, last 3 tax years." And he's like, "Yeah, you do make this much money." So there were times where I would get a check. Most of it would go to my ex-wife for my child support, and I would be left with $100, $200 because I didn't work any overtime. So between that and a back injury that I suffered from really just, wear and tear on our bodies as firefighters, we get beat up, So between that back injury that left me, laid up for a year after surgery, the ideation started around that time. And I just thought to myself, if I can't do this job, what can I do? What else I put all the eggs in this basket. Who am I if I'm not a firefighter? And, it still makes me a little emotional, which is something I just let happen. And so after the surgery, I tried to get back to work. The wheels fell off again in my life between the divorce I kept on giving, child custody of the kids. I got 3 sons, the post-traumatic stress, the alcoholism. I got in trouble. And that's when I had my closest suicide attempt, and ended up through the suggestion of the union, actually, who sequestered a contract with the Counseling Team International, which is it's a company that is run by Nancy Bull, who's a wonderful woman, who put together a group of counselors for first responders, and they're all culturally competent clinicians. And so the long and the short of it is that I ended up, by direction of the union president, who was still a really good friend of mine, Rick Cheatham, taking a bus, because I had lost everything when I was injured, to this counselor, Shauna Hill, and she suggested I go to a 5.5 day trauma retreat called Save a Warrior. And after I went through that whole process, my whole life changed. And that's the long and the short of it. The wheels fell off, and some really amazing people came back for me.
So what are you doing today? I mean, out of that, like you said, your life changed, and now your focus is, you're still active as a firefighter and you're also a paramedic, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And so you're still working. I guess you're off today, but you're still working.
Yep.
So what are you doing now in exchange for what you've been given? What are you doing?
Right. So a whole lot. And it's really, really incredible how different my life is today than it was 3 years ago when I ended up in the seat at what we call SAW, or Save a Warrior. I just got off duty this morning, and I took a couple phone calls. I attended a meeting online, a 12-step meeting. I talked to someone from that meeting. I went home, I shaved real quick. I threw on, these clothes, and I headed to the office in Costa Mesa, Newport area in Southern California, where I do outreach for first responder wellness by Simple Recovery, which is a treatment center set up by Dr. Stephen Odom, who's worked in addiction for a really, really long time and worked with special populations. He put this together. We met along the road, and we hit it off. And he's one of my best friends and one of the most amazing men I've ever met. And he put together this really amazing program that I wish I would have had when I was struggling with my addiction, right? And it's all first responders. It's addiction and co-occurring post-traumatic stress. So we work on the alcohol or the drug issue. We process all that stuff. We give these folks here really good coping skills, and then we can work on the PTS. So we have culturally competent clinicians. It's a really incredible, amazing program. Equine therapy, EMDR, neurofeedback for people who, we not one thing fits all. So we're really good at seeing what works. And we, fortunately, unfortunately, that we have 3 houses and they're full. The detox is all first responder also. And so we're helping a lot of people right now. So that's first and foremost, I had to get sober when I left Save a Warrior, and that into 12-step program. And I was off duty on the back injury still, and didn't know if I'd ever make it back to work. But I really at that time was okay with it. I was getting sober. I was going to meetings, and then just step by step, just like these men had told me, hey, look, if you meditate every day, if you say your prayers, if you go find somebody to help, and stop thinking about yourself so damn much, your life will get better. And and that you got to give it away to keep it. And that was a concept that I didn't understand at all. It was like, hey, listen, I'm not gonna volunteer to do anything unless I'm making time and a half, with my uniform on. I was never taught to really how to be of service. I just wasn't, right? So my dad left when I was very young, and I have a lot of childhood trauma. I mean, my life wasn't all bad, but I wasn't taught those skills, right? So these men taught me that, and that's what I did. I meditate every day. I teach meditation, and I ended up getting really good at telling my story in 12-step. And so then, guys on the department, I made it back to work, which is a miracle. You're looking at a miracle that doesn't come from a place of ego. It's just, I shouldn't really be working for all the things I was doing to dissociate. And luckily, by the grace of God and some really good men, I still have a job. And so I got my act together, and I was out teaching meditation. Just different people along the way were like, hey, can you come to this fire academy? Shauna Hill, who was my therapist at the time, who's a colleague of mine now, was like, hey, why don't you come down and teach the alcohol portion of our peer support classes? And because my guy canceled, and it was just all these things started falling out of the sky. And I just got really good at telling my story. And I went out, and one day a buddy of mine was like, hey, can you come teach the basic fire academy meditation and tell your story? I was like, okay. And it just so happened that the chief was there that day. He listened in, and he's like, yeah, I think we want to make this part of our curriculum. And all of a sudden I worked the next day. I was in my board shorts and flip flops. I went down to college, Santa Ana College, where they have a fire tech program. And I got hired in my board shorts and flip flops to teach mental health, for the new recruits, which is really, really one of my favorite things to do. Is
that common? I mean, in the fire service for new recruits to have a whole class on mental health? Is that common?
So I would say not really, but it is becoming more and more common, especially in Southern California. I think in California altogether, I think we're one of the states that's really between Cal Fire and the committees that they put together to write curriculum for the state fire marshal. And when it comes to mental health, I think we're at the tip of the spear in the state. I work with a lot of those clinicians and a lot of the people that are kind of doing that. And so I would say here in California, we're really, really good at it. I'm trying to get I've been to Arizona, I've spoke, I'm trying to get out to Colorado. Some days I just get on the phone and I cold call. I really do. I look at the biggest cities in Colorado, and I call, I pick up the phone, and I get a hold of their peer support lead, and I just say, hey, look, this is who I am, and I want to share some of our resources. And at first, I hate saying this, but it kind of makes sense, is that as first responders, we're kind of like the mafia, in a way. You really have to, we're a tight knit group of people, and you got to be vouched for, and you got to really know what you're talking about for us to believe you, if you will, or to even let you in, right, to our circles, especially when it comes to this, because a lot of this stuff has been kept a dirty little secret for a long time, right? It's not fires that are killing us. It's not cancer that's killing us. It's not, and I'm speaking for, I can speak for both police and fire right now. It's just not line of duty deaths that's killing us. We're killing ourselves. Right. We have a suicide epidemic going on. So a long way of answering your question is that I think in California, it's becoming more common. I teach the mental health portion at Santa Ana College. I wish I could go out all day long and just teach at academies, but some of the local fire departments have asked me to come out and teach at their fire academies, and I do. And it's funny because when I first came back to Anaheim, right, I had burned a lot of bridges, and I was not a very nice guy, and I was a totally different person when I came back to work. And it took my own department a little while to really, they were just kind of watching me from afar, like, is this real? How long is this going to last? Like, and then I was actually teaching all these other fire academies. And then because I'm at the station that has the training company, and one of my dear friends is a training company chief, finally asked me to teach in Anaheim. So I started helping and just kind of teaching meditation. Meditation is a big part of my healing. I don't take any medications anymore, and I was on Lexapro and Ambien and all these medications that they were throwing at me that and self-medicating, and meditation is my medication now. And so warrior meditation is what was taught to me at Save a Warrior, which is a trademark meditation technique that these men give away for free. And so I just kind of started teaching that because it was working for me. And then my sponsor at the time in 12-step was like, hey, have you ever heard of Vipassana meditation? And I was like, no, what's that? He's like, well, I go out to the desert in 29 Palms and I meditate for 18 hours a day, and I take a vow of silence, and I don't speak for 10 days, and I eat vegan. And I'm like, that sounds really miserable. I'll never do it, but I did it. And it was a game changer. So Vipassana meditation is the technique the Buddha taught in its purity, and it takes 10 days to learn it. And I try to do one 10-day sit, we call it, a year. So meditation has been really important to me. And like I said, I teach it. The college also sends me out to different fire departments. 2 days ago, I was in the city of Burbank teaching their fire department how to meditate. And it's
What's
interesting.
the response from people? What are they saying, and the feedback you're getting?
Right. That's a great question. So if you look at me, I'm all tatted up. I'm kind of a big guy. I'm not a little guy, and I have a story behind it, and I'm one of them. So the way I deliver it, and then for us, when I talk about the science behind meditation and what it does to heal your neural pathways, and that our brains are neuroplasticity, and these are things that that speak to these folks, especially because we're kind of like doctors, just kidding, as medics, and we understand a little bit of science and medicine, and so that speaks to these people. And then this is the thing, and I tell them straight up, look, if I was you 5 years ago, and I was sitting up here, or you were sitting up here saying you're going to teach me meditation, and that's going to solve a lot of my problems, I would think that you were crazy, and I would be the guy making jokes and being a jerk. So I tell them, if you're thinking that, it's okay. But here's the thing. Today, I'm going to teach it to you. We're going to do it together, and we might share your experience if you want to. And I promise you, if you keep doing it, things will change mentally, physically, and spiritually. If you want to talk about that stuff, you can call me. Right. So I make them do it. And it usually I get little referrals, or not referrals, but they give me little scores on the score sheet, evaluation, if you will. And it's funny because I'll go through them, and it's always like the best class ever. Really enjoyed hearing your story. So when I mix in my story a little bit and I get really raw about what happened to me when I was little, and what I was doing, and the night of my suicide attempt. And so they listen. I get their attention really quick. Mm-hmm. And so I would say mostly people are really, really awesome and receptive, because I guess, I feel like God's repurposed me to go out there and do this. So I kind of have big guns upstairs kind of backing me on this, but I always get one evaluation that's not very nice. And it's funny because I'm like, okay, this is the guy that needs it the most.
So your issue with post-traumatic injury took you down the substance abuse path.
Right.
How prevalent is that in your industry?
Well, I'll tell you this much. From different, I put down the video game controller a long time ago, and I picked up these things called books, and they have a lot of really good information in them. And so I've been listening to a lot of them and reading a lot of them. And the ones I've read that are really, really good when it comes to this subject say that 50% of people with post-traumatic stress dissociate with drugs and alcohol. So now you're taking a whole group of people, right? First responders. And by the way, veterans, cops, firefighters, corrections, dispatchers, all these first responders, our brains don't know what uniform we're wearing or what badge we're wearing. Trauma is trauma, right? So I like to say that, but so, man, I'm having a moment.
It's okay. I have many of those.
We got up a couple times last night. So, why was I saying all that? Oh, this is awesome.
So talking about substance abuse.
So, right. So 50% is associated with drugs and alcohol, right? So here we're talking about a whole group of people who are traumatized, because trauma is in the job description, and they're old-fashioned coping skill is to go have a beer. Well, I know for me, like if we met in the morning at the bar that opened at 6 a.m., everybody would leave at noon and I was still there until closing time, right? So, and a lot of people drink in silence, a lot of people, but to answer your question, it's more prevalent than we think it is. It's an old-fashioned way of coping and dealing with it that really gets a lot of people in trouble. So I love the fact that, and you asked, there's more stuff that I'm doing too, but in regards to this, I'm, alcoholics are my peeps. So I really want to, and through Shift Wellness, which is a company that Dr. Odom, Devin O'Day, and I created out of necessity for just going out and talking about first responder wellness, is that there were departments that we wanted to get the message across that, hey, look, the answer is to get your people, help they need from the best people that are doing the work out there, that know what they're doing, that we have good peer support teams that are making people feel comfortable enough to ask for help. We are writing algorithms on how to get people the time off, how get them to the right place, get them paid, really making our first responders feel safe enough to ask for help, where suicide is not an option, that we get these people to these resources and get them back to work healthy, and to finish out their career, right? That it's not a career ender if you were dissociating and you got yourself in trouble by getting a DUI because you were drinking and driving or something along that nature, that we get you the help you need and get you back to work, right? So to answer your question, that a lot of us dissociate with drugs and alcohol, and sometimes it gets out of control. It stops working. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're an alcoholic. It just means that your coping skill is using alcohol, and it just stops working after a while, and it can get you into trouble. So let's get these folks resources in back. So, and then through Shift Wellness, we do a lot of things. We have, there was a trauma retreat, like I talked about, Save a Warrior, that I went to, and they treat first responders and veterans for free. It's, and they do a really good job. Jake Clark started an amazing program, and he likes to say they moneyballed the suicide problem, which means they figured it out and they have the solution. Because since 2012, the last time I talked to Jake, we've had over 1,000 warriors with a plan to commit suicide, ideation, or both come through that program, and we've only lost 4 since 2012. So the VA is looking at us, and how do you measure soul work? There's no clinicians there. It's all just warrior led. And there's a lot to that. And I try to share with people when I'm speaking bits and pieces of how we end up, what we say, in the seat, right? So a lot of spouses, families are really, really important to me, because I saw the devastating effects that my post-traumatic stress had on my family, right? Which we call secondary trauma. There's terms for it. There's medical names for it. We bring this stuff home to our families, and then all the alcohol abuse and all that, and the divorce. And so women and men, spouses, were coming home and saying, hey, look, my so-and-so just came home from Save a Warrior. He's doing really good, but I've been taking care of this fool and the house and the kids for the last 10 years. What about me? Can I come to Save a Warrior? And I'm like, well, are you a veteran or first responder? And they're like, no. And I was having to turn them away, and it was breaking my heart. And so together with Dr. Odom, Shauna Hill, Tiffany Atala, who they're both clinicians who work with first responders. Tiffany works here at First Responder Wellness. Also, I work with her husband at the fire department. He's a captain. And we put together a spouses retreat called the Sage Project, or the Sage Retreat. And it's we've had a couple of them now. We have another one coming up in July, and it's wonderful. I love doing these retreats, because these women come thinking that they're gonna learn how to live and or cohabitate with their first responder, and they learn that it's about taking care of themselves first. So so I wear a lot of hats. I'm on the peer support team at work also. I speak all over the country. I what else? And it's weird. It's weird even like sometimes I'm like, I should write all this stuff down because oh, the other thing I'm really proud of too is that we've put together through Shift Wellness, we put together curriculum to teach meditation from to kindergartner through eighth graders, and we pitched it to a couple school districts, and actually the San Juan Capistrano School District was going to pilot the program in second grades, and then COVID hit and schools closed down. So I'm a real advocate of meditation, like you've heard already a bunch, and sobriety, and just working through childhood trauma. And I just make myself available all the time. Like I always tell people, my phone's always on. My phone number's out there in the world. I don't even care if you're struggling and you need to just talk, call me. You know, that's how I stay well.
Yeah. Well, we are talking with Matt Fiorenza here on First Responder Friday, and today is actually the talk today is actually recorded live, and so Matt is with us here in the chat down below. If you want to ask Matt a question, he will respond to your question in the chat in the comments. So go ahead and put those questions in the comments, and he'll respond to that. Matt, so in your work that as you've gone around the country, have you dealt with both paid and volunteer organizations? And what's the difference? And how have you seen a difference in those two groups?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, it's it's always an interesting conversation because, right, we have these fire departments that have these very large budgets that still may or may not have a line item in that budget for peer support and mental health. Right now, we're talking about these rural areas, you know, across the country and in Canada that have volunteer firefighters that experience the same traumas that we do as paid firefighters. And how do they get the help when the paid departments aren't even, you know? So it's really sad. We try to reach out to those folks as much as we can and share the resources, because a lot of the resources that and some of the people that I work with and their nonprofits, these resources are free, which is awesome. So you know, the difference in the trauma is zero, right? But the difference in who's paid and who's not paid, it doesn't really matter when it comes to mental health. So we just try to, you know, douse them with all kinds of resources that are from nonprofits. Another one is Next Rung, which is a good friend of mine, Charlie Brown, and his partner Blake in Georgia. Charlie's here in Glendale, and they have a nonprofit called Next Rung, and they, you know, you call them and they'll help you get to a counselor and they'll pay for it. So there are so many of these nonprofits popping up that are vetted and that are really doing some good work, and so we try to give those volunteer departments resources like that, to where, hey, look, if you're struggling and your department's not really supporting you that much because you're working for free, because for the love of the work, which is, gosh, maybe back in the day, I would have done it for free, but knowing what I know now, I don't know. So those people are really special, really special. So, like I said, trauma's trauma, and it doesn't care if we're paid or not. And so we just try to give those people the free.
That's awesome. I mean, I live here in Emmitsburg, Maryland, which is the home of the National Emergency Training Center.
Mm-hmm.
And our local fire station here apparently is one of the most visited fire stations in the country. And it's primarily a volunteer station. And it's amazing. And I have the privilege now of, excuse me, got to edit that out. Have the privilege now of being able to ride along with them occasionally on some of their calls. They've invited me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been speaking to some of them over the last few years, and some of the experiences they've had are just unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're going out on a call and it's a family member, or it's and those kind of things. In fact, I spoke to one retired firefighter. He was a volunteer. He's a local photographer, and he was he's a longtime firefighter. And he told me he's in his 70s now. He said, "You know what? when that whistle blows, and here in town the whistle still blows when there's an emergency,
Uh-huh.
just to let the community know that this is going on. He said when
Right.
that whistle blows and I hear on the scanner that it's a working fire with entrapment, he said that triggers me back to an event that happened 40 years ago.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
He
Yeah.
said that was 40 years ago, and that still bothers me.
Right. And that's why right, the idea between for meditation and EMDR treatment is that the brain is tricked, if you will, into recreating REM sleep, is where we process trauma, and that clinician will talk you down that rabbit hole until that physiological response to that memory becomes less and less and less and less. And through meditation, that happens naturally. These things, people have this idea that meditation is supposed to be, you're supposed to be relaxed and it's supposed to take you here and there. But actually, some of the stuff that comes up when I sit in the desert for 10 days is scary, and I'm like, where did that come from? And it's the idea is that you can sit with it long enough, you're safe in a safe place to let your body process it. And a lot of firefighters, we don't get good sleep. And I could tell you when I, for a small amount of time, I lived in the city that I work in, and I went into a call one time where the girl who was having trouble was screaming my name because she knew me. And I'll tell you, it's one of those things that when you don't know somebody, it's a lot easier to do the job than when you do. So I really couldn't even imagine living in a community and working in a community that small where everybody and you're, wow, that's some extra trauma, right? Those are extra snapshots that we keep, up here. And that's why absolutely. I drive through the city that I work in, especially on the west end of town, which is, dangerous and poor and, and where there's a lot of crime and I can look at buildings and boom, there's that memory. Now, do I have a physiological response to it? Sometimes, most of the time, hopefully, I don't like the heart pounding one. I like the one where it brings a tear to my eye, cause that's my body just processing, but to feel like you're standing there again after 40 years, that catches up to you, especially in our retirement years. We unfortunately have a lot of people who retire from 30 years as a firefighter or a law enforcement officer or a dispatcher, corrections officer who end up yelling at the wife and drinking too much, and they end up in the treatment center. And it's like, you did way too many good things for so many people over 30 years. You should be enjoying the rest of your life and not sitting on the couch hypervigilant, replaying, calls that you went on 30 years ago. And it's just really sad. It's really sad, but there's a solution to it. It's just asking for help and getting the right resources that work for you and being honest, open, and willing.
What is needed to break down that culture of being unwilling or too macho or whatever to ask for help, to raise their hand and say, hey, I need help? What needs to happen in order to make that an easier step?
Well, first of all, I was taught at Save a Warrior that macho comes from so the work that we do there is all, it's all depth psychology, a lot of it, in Carl Jung and his teachings, which we call this the athlete warrior, the athlete warrior, right? Warriors want to defeat, conquer, and collect the rewards, and athletes just want to look good. And then we end up in these archetypes as first responders, when really we need to be statesmen and spirit, which is in all service to others, so we can get to, back to wherever it is we came from. I call it God, you call it the universe, whatever, right? So we have a lot of athlete warriors out there, and with a lot of childhood trauma, turns out. So we have this culture it's a shame-based culture of people who are covering up all this stuff inside with the badge and the promotion and the new truck and I like to call material solutions for spiritual problems. We're the best at it, right? So how do we get through to these people and tell them that it's okay to ask for help? So in my experience, number one, we come up with algorithms as organizations that make it safe and we don't threaten anyone's job, right? That's first and foremost.
That's what I've heard is the biggest thing is, I'm afraid of my job. I'm going to lose my job.
Right. If I, especially as a law enforcement officer, if I say that this is what I'm thinking, they're going to take my gun away, and you take my gun away, that's my career. And I've been doing this for way too long, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, as you know. A lot of it's mental health. There's a lot of people in pain on both sides of whatever issue it is, right? It's just this planet has a lot of pain right now, and people are in pain, and they're, and so a lot of it is, it's shame, and so we need to take away the stigma by offering these people the best resources that are out there, right? Because that's the other thing. All these places and people are popping up and they're saying, yeah, we treat first responders and come to us and this and that. And I'm hearing some not so good stories that people aren't delivering what they say they are, because they know we get a paycheck every 2 weeks, that we make pretty good money, right, in some places, and that we have good insurance. And so we got to be really careful that and I think we are, that we're vetting out the right resources, right? So that when someone does ask for help, that's not normally used to asking for help, we get them in a place where they're going to get the best care, right? So it's algorithms. How are we going to give the people the time off? We're not going to threaten their jobs. It's not going to cost them a promotion down the road, things like that. And then just get more and more of us, especially in command staff, being vulnerable and being honest about, maybe their own struggles, and making it really normal to do a debrief and to whether or not you want to be there. Yeah, it's uncomfortable to sit in some feelings, but you being at a debrief, which is voluntary for the most part, might not be so much for you, but for the guy next to you who needs to hear the message, right? That needs to hear your perspective of that call. Or, we really just need to bring more of the brother and sisterhood and fire family and these police family and these things we talk about that we've kind of gotten away from. I just think it should start from the top down, but I think this is a movement. This mental health movement is really starting from the bottom up. I got to be honest with you. It's just in some places. So we need to make it normal. We need to make meditation and yoga and just organic, holistic ways of healing part of the everyday, day in, day out, right? You see first responders, they'll work out all day long. They'll lift weights and they'll eat healthy, but it's body, mind, and spirit, and however that looks for whatever you believe, that there is science behind meditation. It's not just a spiritual thing, and that it actually heals your brain, and that we make these things normal, that I'm not such a weirdo. The guys make fun of me at the station, but when they're having, which is all out of fun, but they'll pull me aside when they're having trouble sleeping and say, hey, Maddie, what's that meditation technique again? Can you show me how to do it? They make little memes of me, with butterflies, and morning meditation got me like this and that, but they're listening, and so we need to make these things just normal and normalize it and really teach our new people. And that's why I've been to the police academy also, and I've taught there, not officially, but anytime anyone asks me to go out and speak, or definitely to teach meditation, I jump on that opportunity to do that. So yeah, it's just about making it normal and getting more people to be out there telling their story. We also work with a lot of workers' comp when we're out there doing consulting for these departments. We're helping some work with workers' comp, and some, we have a really wonderful workers' comp doctor that we've been working with in our city that's really wants to who understands that delaying treatment because you're going to deny someone because you need to look into it further or whatever. Workers' comp is kind of a messed up system. We're working on it, but we're working with these doctors to say, hey, look, we can't waste any time. We need to get these folks off duty and to a clinician that can start working on them right away, and so that they can get better and get back to work, because it's an injury, just like if you were to break your arm. and instead of thinking that workers' comp is a death sentence to retirement, you know. So it's just about changing the culture from the bottom up.
And when you have healthy first responders responding to my emergency, your emergency, they're better. Everybody's better, right?
Oh yeah,
They work better. They can the end result is better,
yeah,
and for whatever the tragic emergency is, I mean, sending an injured first responder into someone else's worst day, is to me as a civilian, it's like that's crazy.
right.
you know,
Yeah, totally.
it's like in warfare, someone that had their leg blown off in a landmine, sending them out to into a firefight and helping someone else.
Right.
They're dealing
Absolutely.
with their big injury, and here it's hidden, right?
Right.
And so I think when we can get first responders who are healthy, then everyone's better and our community's better.
Yeah, totally. And I think it would solve a lot of the world's problems right now. You know, people look up to us. You know, they how many how many people would hand you their not breathing baby
Hmm.
and never know you? You
Right,
know,
right.
it happens all the time to us. So the community trusts us, and right now there's not a lot of trust with some people, and that I think it's a mental health issue. I really do,
Hmm.
and I think, like you said, I think people look up to us. They look up to the uniform. They trust us, and I think if we're mentally healthy and physically healthy, that's just going to spill over into our communities.
Absolutely. Well said. So, Matt, where can people get in touch with you? How can they reach you? What's the best way to do that?
So the best way to get in touch with me is really you can give me a call. Like I'm no stranger to put my phone number out there. You know, I'll give it to you right now. It's 714-917-9395. That's my phone number. And I already get a bunch of weird calls from people trying to sell me stuff. So if you want to give my phone number away, it's okay. Um, but for every 10 calls I get like that, I'll get one person that's hurting, and that's what it's all about for me. So
Mhm.
to give me a call, send me a text, or you can send me an email. I have a couple email addresses. One, matt@saveawarrior.org. One, matt.fiorenza@simplerecovery.com, and maddie@shiftwellness.com. So those are some of the ways you can get a hold of me. Any of those work. I have a Instagram page. It's Shift Wellness. It's Shift_Wellness. Fireman Maddie is my Instagram page. By the way, my friends call me Maddie. You know, as we get to know each other, Conrad, you can call me Maddie too. Just kidding. But yeah, I have a Facebook page that I'm always,
Mhm.
whenever I go speak at a fire department, I always get 10 more friends on Facebook and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So I'm really just an ordinary guy who's out there, trying to do my best to help the next person,
Mhm.
you know.
Well, I want to say, just for me as a civilian, thank you for your service and for making the sacrifices to do what you do. I mean, you were up all night, and you're making calls, even though I'm not in your city. Thank you for doing that and for making that community a better place
Yeah, you're
because
worth
of
it.
what you're doing.
Yeah, you're worth it.
And so we've been talking with Matt Fiorenza, and he is actually right now live in the chat in the comments below. If you have a question or you want to reach out to him, perhaps Matt will put his email address right there in the comments as we're talking, because this is a recorded show. And so I want to say thank you, Matt, for joining us today and for being a part of the program. I really appreciate what you're doing. Looking forward to getting to know you better. And as we start working on this film project and coming out to California and hanging out with you for a couple days, that'd be awesome in order to do that, to tell your story and to move the needle toward wellness for first responders.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'm really honored to be part of it. Really, it's about just getting the message out there to as many people as we can that it's okay to not be okay.
So we have coming up in the next few weeks, we have a couple of other events. Actually, next week we have, and I'm going to mess up her last name, so I'm just going to say this up front. Alicia Swade is going to be with us. She is a licensed counselor, and we are going to be recording her interview actually this afternoon as well. So she's going to come and talk about counseling and wellness for first responders. And then coming up on Friday, July 24th, I have Kathy Thomas. She is a clinical director for the Warriors Rest Foundation out of Oklahoma. She's going to be with us for First Responder Friday. And so please put that on your calendar and join us for each Friday as often as we can, First Responder Friday. Today we have had the privilege of having Matt Fiorenza with us. And Matt, again, thank you. And for those of you watching, thank you for watching and participating. And please share this video and share the Facebook page for PTSD 911 movie, and I would really appreciate it. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody, for watching. You all have a great day, and we will talk to you again soon.